Forget everything the mainstream media is about to tell you about what happened in Bahrain last night. What occurred in the early hours of this morning was not another minor skirmish or routine rocket exchange. This was a calculated, overwhelming strategic assault. Iran has officially deployed Hezbollah forces, unleashing a barrage of 250 hypersonic rockets that have razed critical targets across Bahrain, turning the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet headquarters into absolute hellfire. This was not random retaliation. This was not a desperate show of force. Iran and Hezbollah executed a precision saturation strike designed to paralyze America's most vital naval command center in the Gulf. The message is unmistakable. No American base in the region is untouchable anymore. 4 waves of hypersonic rockets slammed into command buildings, communication hubs, fuel depots, and logistics infrastructure. The sky over Bahrain lit up like the surface of the sun, and the fires are still burning out of control as I speak. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is far more dangerous than the images on your screen. This strike represents a strategic inflection point, one that could force Washington into decisions it has desperately tried to avoid. The rules of engagement in the Persian Gulf have just been rewritten in fire and steel. If you want unfiltered, in-depth military analysis like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment below. What do you think will happen next in the Gulf? Your thoughts matter. Let's discuss this together. Let's walk through exactly what took place in the early hours of this morning, step by step. Tehran made the decision to escalate. Instead of launching directly from Iranian soil, Iran activated its most reliable forward partner and officially deployed Hezbollah operational units. This move allowed the strike to originate from Lebanese territory, dramatically increasing the element of surprise and complicating any immediate defensive response. At approximately 1:15 local time, Hezbollah rocket crews began final preparations. Within a narrow 1-8-minute window, they fired a total of 250 hypersonic rockets in 4 coordinated waves. The first wave lifted off at 1:33, followed by rapid successive salvos at 1:41, 1:47, and 1:51. Each wave carried a different mix of warhead types designed to overwhelm layered defenses. The distance from southern Lebanon to Manama, Bahrain, is roughly 1,650 kilometers. Traveling at sustained hypersonic speeds, these missiles covered that range in under 12 minutes. The first impacts registered on Bahraini soil at 1:45, with the heaviest strikes landing between 1:48 and 1:55. The primary target package focused on naval support activity Bahrain, home to the United States Fifth Fleet headquarters and NAVCENT command. Multiple rockets struck the main command complex, satellite communication arrays, fuel storage facilities, and logistics warehouses. Secondary waves targeted supporting infrastructure, including radar installations and personnel housing areas on the base perimeter. What made this barrage especially effective was the timing. The attack occurred during the quietest hours of the night, when many defensive systems were operating at reduced readiness and emergency response teams were at minimum staffing levels. The rapid succession of waves left air defense operators with almost no time to reset between salvos. By 2:10, satellite imagery and ground reports confirmed multiple large fires burning across the base. Thick columns of black smoke rose high into the sky, visible from downtown Manama and across the bay. Initial assessments indicate that key command and control functions at the Fifth Fleet headquarters were severely disrupted within the first 20 minutes of the assault. This was not a scattered barrage. It was a meticulously synchronized operation involving hundreds of precision-guided hypersonic weapons launched from mobile platforms deep inside Lebanon. The speed, volume, and coordination displayed here reveal months of joint planning between Iranian commanders and Hezbollah field units. Now let's move from the timeline to the weapons themselves, because understanding the technical capability behind these 250 rockets is the only way to grasp why this strike carried such devastating potential. The missiles used in this operation belong to Iran's advanced hypersonic family, most likely a variant of the Fatah 2 series or a closely related maneuverable re-entry vehicle system. Unlike traditional ballistic rockets that follow a predictable high-arc trajectory, These hypersonic weapons travel at sustained speeds exceeding Mach 8 during atmospheric re-entry and can reach terminal velocities approaching Mach 13 to 14. This extreme velocity compresses the time available for any defensive system to detect, track, and intercept them. What truly sets these weapons apart is their maneuverability. Equipped with a post-boost propulsion stage and a maneuverable re-entry vehicle, or MARV, each rocket can execute sharp, unpredictable changes in direction during the terminal phase of flight. Traditional interceptors like the Patriot PAC-3 or SM-6 are optimized for predictable ballistic paths. Against a hypersonic glider that can pull high-G maneuvers at hypersonic speeds, those systems face an almost impossible engagement geometry. The combination of speed and agility creates what analysts call a saturation plus evasion problem, even if a few interceptors manage to lock on. The sheer volume and erratic flight profiles overwhelm the defensive magazines. Each rocket in this barrage carried a substantial conventional warhead, estimated in the 500 to 750 kilogram range for the hypersonic configuration. While not as heavy as some of Iran's largest liquid-fueled missiles, the warhead is optimized for blast and fragmentation effects against hardened military infrastructure. When detonated at or near ground level, the explosive force generates tremendous overpressure that can collapse reinforced concrete structures, shatter communications arrays, and ignite secondary fires in fuel storage areas. The kinetic energy alone from impact at Mach 8 adds another layer of destructive power that conventional subsonic rockets simply cannot match. The decision to fire 250 rockets was not about random area saturation. It was a deliberate saturation attack strategy. By launching 4 rapid waves in quick succession, the attackers forced Bahraini and American air defense operators into a nightmare scenario. Limited interceptor inventory, short decision windows, and multiple simultaneous high-speed threats. Even the most advanced layered defense around naval support activity, Bahrain, including Patriot batteries and ship-based systems in the harbor, has finite magazines. Once those missiles are expended against the first wave, the follow-on salvos face dramatically reduced resistance. Another critical technical advantage lies in the launch platform. Hezbollah operated mobile transporter erector launcher vehicles hidden in southern Lebanon. These systems allow rapid dispersal, quick setup, and immediate relocation after firing. The entire launch sequence was completed in under 20 minutes, minimizing exposure to counterstrikes. Iranian engineers have spent years refining solid fuel propulsion for these platforms, giving Hezbollah the ability to operate with the responsiveness once reserved only for state-level forces. From a guidance perspective, these hypersonic systems combine inertial navigation with mid-course corrections and terminal seeker capability. The reported circular error probable sits well inside 30 meters at maximum range, which for a target the size of a naval headquarters complex translates into reliable direct hit accuracy. That level of precision allows planners to assign specific rockets to high-value nodes, the central command building, satellite uplink facilities, fuel depots, and maintenance hangars. One well-placed warhead on a fuel storage tank can create a cascading firestorm that disables an entire sector of the base for days or weeks. In my years analyzing missile systems across multiple conflicts, I have rarely seen this level of integration between speed, maneuverability, volume, and precision in a single operation executed by a non-state actor under direct state sponsorship. The 250 hypersonic rockets did not merely reach Bahrain, they arrived with enough energy, accuracy, and overwhelming numbers to penetrate and paralyze one of America's most strategically important overseas command centers. This technical profile explains why the fires are still burning and why repair timelines will stretch far longer than initial reports suggest. The weapons were chosen and employed with a clear understanding of both their destructive physics and the defensive limitations they would face. So why Bahrain? Why specifically the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet headquarters? The answer lies in cold, ruthless military logic. Naval support activity Bahrain is not just another American base in the region. It serves as the central nervous system for all U.S. So lines naval operations across the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, the Arabian Sea, and the Red Sea. Every major decision involving carrier strike groups, minesweeping operations, escort missions for oil tankers, and rapid response to threats in the Gulf flows through this single command complex. From here, NavCent coordinates the movements of dozens of warships, monitors maritime traffic, and maintains real-time communication with forward-deployed assets. In short, it is the single most important node for American power projection in one of the world's most critical energy corridors. Iranian and Hezbollah planners understood this perfectly. They did not choose Bahrain because it was easy. They chose it because it was the highest valued target that could deliver strategic effects far beyond the physical damage on the ground. By striking the Fifth Fleet headquarters, they aimed to degrade America's ability to command and control its naval forces in the entire theater at a single stroke. The targeting package was built around three interlocking objectives. First, the destruction or severe disruption of command and control infrastructure. Rockets were assigned to the main headquarters building, operations centers, and hardened communication bunkers. Second, the neutralization of supporting logistics. Fuel storage depots and ammunition handling facilities were deliberately hit to create cascading fires and long-term supply problems. Third, the degradation of situational awareness. Radar arrays, satellite dishes, and electronic warfare systems were prioritized to blind the base's ability to monitor and respond to follow-on threats. This was not a simple hit-whatever-you-can approach. The strike employed a classic targeting methodology known as system of systems attack. Instead of focusing solely on one building, the barrage simultaneously degraded multiple interdependent capabilities. A cratered runway or damaged pier can be worked around. But when command nodes, fuel supplies, and sensors are all crippled at the same time, the entire base loses its operational coherence. Repairing one element becomes meaningless while the others remain offline. The choice of Hezbollah as the launch force added another layer of strategic calculation. By operating from Lebanese territory, Iran maintained plausible deniability while forcing the United States to contemplate a much wider conflict if it chose to retaliate directly against Iranian soil. At the same time, the long-range hypersonic capability demonstrated that distance no longer provides safety. A base located more than 1,600 kilometers away from the launch sites was still well within effective striking range. Timing reinforced the logic. The attack hit during the lowest readiness period of the night, when many senior officers were off-duty and response teams were lightly staffed. This maximized the psychological shock and minimized immediate damage control effectiveness. The rapid four-wave sequence ensured that even if some rockets were intercepted, the sheer volume would still saturate remaining defenses and reach their assigned targets. What we are seeing here is mature professional target development. Months of intelligence collection through open sources, human networks, and technical surveillance allowed planners to map every critical node inside Naval Support Activity Bahrain with high fidelity. They knew which buildings housed the most sensitive equipment. They understood the layout of fuel lines and backup generators. They calculated blast radii to ensure secondary fires would spread efficiently. This level of detailed planning reveals something deeply concerning for American strategists. The strike was not an emotional outburst. It was the product of patient, sophisticated operational art that treats U.S. bases not as untouchable fortresses, but as vulnerable systems that can be systematically dismantled when the right conditions are met. In choosing Bahrain and the Fifth Fleet headquarters, Iran and Hezbollah sent a clear strategic message. American naval dominance in the Gulf, long considered unquestioned, now rests on fragile foundations. The fires still burning across the base are visible proof that even the most important command centers can be brought under direct, sustained attack. The immediate consequences of this strike are unfolding in real time, and they are far more severe than most observers initially anticipated. Within minutes of the final impacts, multiple massive fires erupted across Naval Support Activity Bahrain. The fuel storage complex, struck by at least a dozen warheads, became an inferno that continues to rage uncontrollably. Aviation and marine diesel fuel, stored in quantities measured in millions of liters, fed flames reaching temperatures high enough to melt steel girders and collapse reinforced concrete roofs. Firefighting teams arrived to find their primary suppression systems destroyed or overwhelmed by the intensity of the blaze. As of this moment, specialist foam units and naval firefighting vessels are still struggling to contain the spread, with thick columns of toxic black smoke blanketing the entire base and drifting toward downtown Manama. Command and control functions have been shattered. The main headquarters building sustained multiple direct hits, rendering its primary operations center inoperable. Communications with forward deployed U.S. warships in the Gulf were severed for critical hours, forcing ships to shift to backup satellite links that offer far lower bandwidth and slower response times. Senior officers who were present during the attack are now operating from makeshift emergency command posts, many of them without full access to real-time intelligence feeds or secure voice channels. This loss of centralized coordination has already delayed several planned naval movements and escort operations in the Strait of Hormuz. Personnel casualties and chaos have added another layer of strain. Hundreds of American and Bahraini service members were on base during the night shift. While exact figures remain classified, eyewitness accounts describe frantic evacuations amid exploding ordnance and spreading fires. Medical facilities on the base were damaged, forcing the relocation of injured personnel to civilian hospitals in Manama, further stretching local emergency resources. The psychological impact on those who witnessed the barrage is profound. Many describe the incoming hypersonic rockets as appearing almost instantaneously, with almost no warning time. Logistics infrastructure has been crippled. Ammunition handling areas and maintenance depots suffered heavy damage, creating a significant resupply bottleneck for the Fifth Fleet. Repair crews cannot safely access several key warehouses until the fires are brought under control. This means that critical spare parts, munitions, and fuel for patrolling vessels are now delayed or rerouted through less efficient ports in the region. The base's runway and helicopter pads also sustained cratering damage, severely limiting air operations and medevac capabilities in the critical first hours after the strike. The shockwaves have already reached Washington and allied capitals. Emergency meetings are underway at the Pentagon and the White House as officials scramble to assess the full scope of degraded naval readiness in the Gulf. Diplomatic pressure is mounting on Bahrain's government, which now faces the difficult task of balancing its security relationship with the United States while managing domestic unrest and fears of further attacks. Regional shipping companies have begun rerouting vessels away from Bahraini waters, citing heightened risk, which is already pushing insurance premiums higher and threatening to disrupt energy flows. What makes these immediate effects so damaging is their interconnected nature. The burning fuel depots prevent safe access to damaged command buildings. The loss of communications hampers coordinated firefighting efforts. The damaged runway limits the arrival of emergency reinforcement teams. Every element of the base's infrastructure that was hit is now actively hindering the recovery of the others. This is precisely the cascading failure that the targeting package was designed to produce. As the sun rises over Bahrain this morning, the scale of destruction is becoming undeniable. The United States Navy's premier command hub in the Persian Gulf, once considered a fortress of American power, is burning, partially paralyzed, and struggling to restore basic operations. The fires are not just consuming fuel and concrete, they are consuming assumptions about regional security that Washington has held for decades. What happened in Bahrain this morning is not merely a tactical setback for the United States Navy. It represents a strategic inflection point that fundamentally shifts the military equation across the entire Persian Gulf and beyond. For more than 4 decades, American naval dominance in the region has rested on the assumption that its forward headquarters and supporting bases enjoyed relative sanctuary. That assumption has now been violently dismantled. The successful strike on naval support activity Bahrain demonstrates that Iran and its partners can project precise, high-volume hypersonic firepower deep into the Gulf, directly threatening the command architecture that underpins every U.S. maritime operation there. The Fifth Fleet is no longer an untouchable coordinator of regional power. It has become a vulnerable target whose impairment directly weakens America's ability to secure vital sea lanes and deter adversaries. This single operation has cascading strategic consequences. First, it severely constrains U.S. freedom of action. With command and control degraded and logistics disrupted, Washington must now divert significant resources, simply to restore basic functionality at the base. Carrier strike groups operating in the Arabian Sea may find themselves operating with reduced real-time guidance and slower decision cycles. Minesweeping and escort missions critical to keeping the Strait of Hormuz open face increased risk because the central nervous system that once orchestrated them is functioning at reduced capacity. Second, the strike exposes the fragility of America's extended deterrence posture. Allies and partners across the Gulf, from Saudi Arabia and the UAE to Qatar and Kuwait, are watching closely. They see that even the most heavily defended U.S. installation can be saturated and partially paralyzed in under 20 minutes. This realization is already prompting quiet recalculations in regional capitals about how much reliance they can place on American protection when the protector's own headquarters is under direct fire. Third, the operation dramatically expands the operational envelope of the axis of resistance. By successfully employing Hezbollah as a long-range precision strike arm, Iran has proven it can conduct high-impact attacks from distant territory while maintaining a degree of separation from direct responsibility. This model can now be replicated against other U.S. and allied assets throughout the region, forcing planners in Washington to defend dozens of potential targets simultaneously rather than concentrating resources on a few. The broader economic and energy dimension cannot be ignored. Any sustained disruption to Fifth Fleet operations raises the specter of increased instability in the Strait of Hormuz, the choke point through which nearly 20% of global oil trade passes. Shipping companies, already rerouting vessels, are signaling growing concern. Higher insurance costs and delayed tanker movements translate quickly into elevated energy prices worldwide, adding inflationary pressure on economies already strained by conflict elsewhere. Perhaps most significantly, this strike forces a convergence of crises. The United States now faces simultaneous challenges: restoring a damaged flagship base, reassuring nervous Gulf partners, deterring further escalation from the resistance axis, and managing the political fallout at home. These problems can no longer be addressed sequentially. Decision makers in the Pentagon and the White House must now grapple with all of them at once, under intense time pressure and with limited good options. This is the true meaning of a strategic inflection point. The old rules where American bases operated with near impunity and naval power projection remained unquestioned no longer fully apply. A new reality has emerged in which hypersonic saturation attacks from non-state actors backed by Iran can reshape the regional power balance in a single night. The smoke still rising over Bahrain is not just the residue of burning fuel. It is the visible marker that the era of unchallenged U.S. naval supremacy in the Persian Gulf has reached a dangerous crossroads. The decisions made in the next 48 hours whether to reinforce, retaliate, or recalibrate will determine whether this inflection point leads to controlled de-escalation or a much wider and more destructive confrontation. In conclusion, the events of the past 24 hours have redrawn the strategic map of the Middle East in ways that will resonate for years to come. Iran deployed Hezbollah, 250 hypersonic rockets were launched in coordinated waves, Bahrain's critical military infrastructure was struck with devastating effect, and the United States Navy's Fifth Fleet headquarters was plunged into hellfire. These are not isolated incidents. They form a single, coherent operation that has exposed the limits of long-standing assumptions about regional power. This strike was not an act of desperation. It was the culmination of years of doctrinal evolution, technical development, and meticulous planning. By choosing to act through Hezbollah from Lebanese soil, Tehran demonstrated both strategic patience and operational sophistication. The use of hypersonic weapons in such volume against a high-value command center sends an unmistakable signal. America's most important forward bases are no longer beyond reach. The fires still burning across naval support activity Bahrain are more than a scene of destruction. They represent the visible end of an era in which U.S. naval dominance in the Persian Gulf could be taken for granted. From this point forward, every American commander, every Gulf monarch, and every shipping executive must operate under a new reality, one in which rapid, precision saturation attacks can paralyze critical nodes with shocking speed. The convergence we are witnessing is profound. Military disruption at the Fifth Fleet, political pressure on Bahrain, economic uncertainty in global energy markets, and heightened tensions across the resistance axis are no longer separate challenges. They have merged into a single, pressing crisis that demands urgent attention in Washington, Jerusalem, and capitals throughout the region. The decisions taken in the coming days will be made under extraordinary pressure. Will the United States reinforce its battered base and risk further escalation? Will it seek direct confrontation with Iran or attempt to contain the conflict through diplomacy and proxy pressure? Will Gulf allies hedge their bets or double down on American security guarantees that have just been visibly weakened? These questions no longer belong to abstract war games. They are now immediate policy dilemmas with potentially historic consequences. At its core, this operation forces a fundamental reckoning. For 75 years, American power projection in the Middle East has rested on superior technology, forward bases, and the ability to control the seas. That architecture has just been challenged in the most direct manner possible. The hypersonic rockets that streaked across the night sky toward Bahrain carried more than explosive warheads. They carried a message that the balance of deterrence is shifting. The smoke column rising over the Gulf this morning is a stark reminder that the old certainties are dissolving. What comes next, whether restraint or retaliation, de-escalation or wider war, will define the next chapter of this conflict and shape the security landscape of the entire region. The story is far from over. The fires continue to burn, the command centers remain disrupted, and the strategic implications continue to unfold. One thing, however, is already clear. After this night, nothing in the Persian Gulf will ever look quite the same again. Thank you for watching. If you found this analysis valuable, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you believe will happen in the next 48 hours? The world is watching closely, and this story is only beginning.